Even rivers can have islands, and some can have airports. Come fly with me as we depart from November 71 Donegal Springs Airpark, overfly Hershey Park, and follow the Susquehanna River to 71 November Sunbury Airport and Campground. Let's hop into the pilot seat and get started. Alright, as we start running through the checklist, you'll notice that we've got the tugger driver in front of me with his lights on. That's because the plane was right up against the building there, and I had to do a pushback to get some room before we got started. Today we are flying in the Cessna Skyhawk. If you saw my last video, you heard my exciting announcement that I have a discovery flight booked in about 2 weeks, and the flight school where I'll be doing that has Cessna Skyhawks, so I figure I should spend a little bit more time in the Skyhawks here in the channel. If you follow the channel, you know I love Pipers, so I'm almost always in a Piper Warrior or Piper Arrow, but gotta get a little more familiar with the C-172s. On that topic, I've been thinking ahead beyond my discovery flight and looking at some of the things that I'll probably want to get. I'm sure my flight school will give me a list. Those are things like knee boards, pilot logbooks. I've started doing some research. Sometimes I do get real pilots who drop by this channel, so if you have experience as a PPL and you've got some tips for me, I would love to hear them. Please drop them into the comments. I'll take any help I can get. Speaking of real-life pilots, in one of my recent flights to deck on the channel, real-life pilot and CFI Steve Devine left a comment. He flies to deck in many of the other airports that I've been flying to in my channel, and I decided to check out his channel and saw he had a lot of great aviation videos, one of which was to Sunbury Airport. It is an airport and a campground that's on an island in the Susquehanna River. So I'm familiar with Sunbury, but I wasn't familiar with Sunbury Airport, and I was definitely captivated by his flight to it, and it inspired me to do a flight in the simulator myself. This clip is from one of his videos, and I'll put a link to that video, so please check out his channel. We're running with live weather, so let's get the real-world ATIS.
Information Charlie 1556 Zulu, wind variable at 5, visibility 10. Few clouds at 25,000, temperature -1, dew point -14, altimeter 3047. Landing and departing runway 13, visual approaching use. Notice random, no line marked out of service. 5G modem in effect for the airport. For further information, contact flight service frequencies. Flies next contact, you have information Charlie.
We'll toggle back over to CTAF since we're taking off from an untowered field. That ATIS was from Harrisburg, which is the nearest towered field. I also noticed a glitch here in the Cessna 172 in that the comm frequencies and nav frequencies on the first comm radio seem to be linked with the second, so I can't dial in independent frequencies on comm 2, which I would normally have set up at guard at 121.5. We'll dial in Harrisburg's VOR into nav 1, and you can see CDI 1 is already picking it up. We aren't planning on using the VORs for navigation, but it never hurts to have an additional nav aid in the event that you get lost. I'll bring up ForeFlight Web, and we'll run through the pilot's briefing. We are departing from November 71 Donegal Springs Airpark, that is east of Harrisburg, outside of the Delta. We're going to fly north on departure and head towards Hershey. We're going to overfly Hershey Park and change direction there. So we'll fly heading 289er, heading for the Susquehanna River, and specifically for the George M. Wade Memorial Bridge. That'll be our waypoint. Now if I switch to satellite view, this will be a little bit easier to see what we're going to do. So going back to our departure, we're going to fly north on departure, and we're going to look for the intersection of these two routes here, 283 and 743. Then we'll follow 743 all the way to Hershey, and we're going to remain on the north side of 743. As long as we do that, we're guaranteed not to enter the delta of Harrisburg. We'll have a great visual waypoint, which is Hershey Park, so we're going to overfly that, and that's where we change direction. As we head towards the Susquehanna River, we'll overfly Interstate 81 and aim visually for the bridge, and then from there, we're just going to follow the river until we get to Sunbury. ForeFlight Web has really nice composite features, so we can turn on all of the airspaces overlaid on the satellite maps, and this helps you visualize a little bit better about how we're going to avoid entering the Delta airspace of Harrisburg. Alright, so we just follow the river. Sunbury is the island airport up here in the middle of the Susquehanna. Penn Valley just south of it has a weather station, so we'll be sure to get the weather as we approach it. It's left traffic for either direction for the runway, which I think might be a little challenging because you've got some rising terrain on both sides. Donegal Springs traffic, November 359 Golf Charlie, taxi runway 10, Donegal Springs. I'm not sure why my Cessna is hiccuping. I have to say the default Cessna has been a little glitchy for me lately with braking, hiccuping, or just weird behavior. So let me know if you're seeing that too. This is the default airport, and so is Sunbury. The add-ins that I'm using for this will be linked in the video details. I do have a nice photogrammetry add-in for Hershey Park so that we can see the roller coasters. And I'm running with the Google Maps plugin, which replaces the Bing Maps with Google Maps. Okay, we'll do a quick run up here. Transponder to alt, mixture to full rich. We get our trim to takeoff, and we'll set our flaps to 1 notch.
Set for takeoff. Flaps.
Donegal Springs traffic, Cessna 359 Golf Charlie, back taxi, runway 10, Donegal Springs. Alright, as we back taxi here, I'll talk a little bit more about my upcoming flight training. So it's interesting, I'm a bit older, so I've been watching channels like Midlife Pilot, and I can't remember what it's called. There's another person who was in his 50s when he started, so it's something like Flying in Your 50s. And I'm definitely in that category of pilot. So it's been a long time since I've done something that required a lot of study. And as I've been looking at the things that I can expect as I start my lessons, it's kind of like prepping for back to school or college. There's a flight bag to buy, and there's books and notebooks and logbooks and just this school supply list for flying. So it's a cool feeling. It's been a while since I've had that experience, and I'm kind of enjoying it. I am just flying for fun, in case you're wondering. I'm not planning on becoming a commercial pilot and doing a career change at this stage in my life. Some people do, but for me, it's just something that I've always wanted to do. And here we are. So making the leap, and we'll give it a shot and see how it goes. Donegal Springs traffic, Cessna 359 Golf Charlie, departing runway 10, straight out departure to the north, climbing 4,500 Donegal Springs. So I made a point with this flight plan of avoiding the Delta airspace of Harrisburg, but we certainly could have gone through it just by asking permission with a transition. However, then we wouldn't get to see Hershey Park, and I think that's a lot more fun, so that's why we're going that way. I remember my first visit to Hershey when I was in school, and I think I got a I Survived the Super Duper Looper t-shirt. And then I remember going back in my 20s with a bunch of friends and riding the Lightning Loops ride way too many times. It was a roller coaster that takes you through several loops forward and then stops and does the entire thing in reverse, and we rode it I think 6 times back to back because there was no line, and that was a horrible, horrible mistake. Traffic pattern altitude for Donegal Springs is 1,458 feet, and I would like to get to pattern altitude plus 500 feet before doing any turns. We're flying straight out. We do have a turn here, so we're going to wait until we are at 1,900 feet before doing our initial turn. Alright, we are clear, so we're going to do our initial turn to the north, and we're going to start looking for the 2 routes that we're going to follow, and whose intersection is going to be our first waypoint. Alright, that's our first road. That's the east-west one, and we don't have the intersection anywhere in sight, which means we're too far east, so we're going to turn and just follow it until we get to the intersection. A bit embarrassing, but I never took my flaps up, so let's get that fixed now. Oops. Okay, we've got our intersection, so we're going to turn and follow this north until we get to Hershey. And there it is, we've got Hershey Park in sight. So we're going to make our turn once we overfly the park and be on our way. So let's sit back and enjoy that awesome flight simulator scenery. Alright, that was a super cool airport to fly to. I would love to see a freeware or payware version of Sunbury because right now it's pretty barren, and if you look at the videos in real life, it's just filled with RVs and trailers and campers. Looks like a really cool place to go. And it was cool to pick this flight based on a real life flight that another pilot did. So I hope you enjoyed flying along with me once again. If you enjoy content like this, be sure to click that like button, leave me a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks, as always, for flying along with me, and stay tuned for further flight adventures.